Tell us about that photo. Is there a story behind it? What sort of equipment did you use? Welcome to Through the Lens of Faith, 135 years of Courier Photojournalism podcast, where we're getting the stories behind some of the photos that will be on display in a Catholic Courier photo exhibition this October. Now, here are your hosts, Gina Capilazzi and Rebecca LeClaire. Karen Franz has been editor of the Catholic Courier, formerly the Courier Journal, since 1985, and general manager of the parent, the Rochester Catholic Press Association, since 1995.
And when Karen took over as editor, she was the first woman and the second lay editor. And it's just wonderful to have her here because we want to talk about how you were responsible for not only, running the newspaper, but also factoring in photojournalism and bringing us to where we are today, because you are still the editor. What a run.
Well, yeah, I guess.
Oh, but I am honored to be part of the Catholic Courier editorial board with you because I honor what you do with a very small staff. And I think you even mentioned that you were the first to hire a photojournalist to do just that.
I'm not sure about that part. There was a reporter that was part-time, looked like she was a part-time, from what I can tell, part-time writer, part-time photographer, and there was another photographer in the 70s, but there hadn't been one for a while that was focused solely on photojournalism or photography.
Yeah, but for this exhibit that we're going to be talking about and how you've helped with that, it's all about the photojournalism.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it helps tell the story.
Right. Well, and I would argue that photography saved the Catholic Courier, to be very honest. There was a crisis at the beginning of the 80s, a series of bad decisions, politics, a variety of things that had really brought the paper to the brink of bankruptcy. And the entire staff left. There was a bunch of bad press, blah, blah, blah. And so when I arrived in April of 85, I was the first, and for a couple of weeks, I was the only member of the staff. We were down to 8 pages. 4 of which were the canned catechetical canned catechetical package that came from Catholic News Service. There were rumors swirling that the pastors were going to cancel all the subscriptions in a matter of days or weeks. We were getting hate mail, all kinds of stuff. And we desperately needed to signal not only that we were editorially independent, that we were going to play by the rules of the profession only, and we were committed to our journalistic ethics, but also that we were bringing a fresh approach that would bring major quality improvements, because the paper was down to a very bad state. We could have and did send that message over time through our quality in-depth reporting, but there were so many people with so many opinions, and they were really dug in on the fact that the diocese was taking over the paper and it was going to be awful and blah blah and all these things, that through editorial content, I don't think we could have made the impression quickly enough to stave off destruction, if you will, going out of business. We didn't have time to waste, so our signals really needed to be more obvious than that. This was a different ballgame. That things were going to get better. This was a new day, and I knew that big, bold photojournalism was really going to be the answer. So I insisted that one of the 2 journalistic positions that we had money for be dedicated to a photographer rather than another reporter. And I'd fight for that. And I wanted to bring over my very talented colleague from Wolf Publications, Jeff Goulding, to fill that job. And so I brought you a couple of samples.
Oh.
Yeah. This is the paper.
We love showing that.
Yeah. This is the paper that was put out. Yeah, you might want to get a better copy, but that's the issue that went out the week before I started.
Oh, wow.
And this is the
Courier Journal at the
Courier
time.
Journal, yeah. Yep. And this is the issue the first week after Jeff Goulding arrived.
Right, it was a weekly at that time.
Right.
So.
Yeah, sorry, I can't do them both. But yeah, side by side.
So that photograph was, meant to be kind of a poke in the eye, in a sense, to say, hey, we're here. This is going to be different. This is not the status quo. We're not going on this way. Things are going to get better. Things are going to get much more in depth. And so in that measure, I think really photography did save the Catholic Courier.
Yeah, I was going to ask because you showed me these before when we were talking. what was the response when this paper,
Changed.
the change from this one to that one?
Well, this gentleman was in a facility, was a resident in a nursing home, and they weren't too crazy about it because he hadn't been shaved and his glasses weren't clean. Because the reporter Terry Parsons had knew him and had a connection to get them into his room, and he was happy to be interviewed. Without the bureaucratic piece that went typically with that kind of thing. So there was some dissatisfaction of that. But I mean, I think it just got people to sit up and take notice, really. And then, successively, we did a lot more with photography. Coverage of events then as now is largely through photojournalism. What are you going to say about a pet blessing in some rural small parish that rightly deserves coverage, but doesn't have a lot of news going on? So, photojournalism is a way of providing them good coverage, getting, their community in the paper, making them feel included, and being interesting and attractive to people from other parts of the diocese without, trying to write a story about, 16 pets were blessed on Sunday,
Yeah. Well, people love their pet pictures.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Babies, pets.
Exactly. Or as my old boss at Wolf Publications used to say, names, 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 faces, faces, faces.
Well, we have talked to some of the sports photographers and, parents. I'm a sport parent too. If my kid is featured in the newspaper, that's great. And for a business sense, because you are the business end of the Catholic Courier as well, it helps for advertising and selling. It's a basic concept when we're talking about publications. But obviously, I know you as a journalist too and an editor, you want to tell a story.
Right.
And with this exhibit, you also want to show the best of the best.
Right. Absolutely.
And remind people of the good work you've done over these years.
Well, yeah, I mean, the year after this whole transition took place, the very next June of '86, we won General Excellence in the Catholic Press Association. So just because we were, I think, ahead of the curve of moving into more image-based journalism. And, I think people prior to that thought of, pictures as decorations or as a way to break up the gray or whatever you want to, however you see that. But we wanted them to actually have a great deal of content and to, depict things like, aging is not always a pretty picture. Sometimes you don't really feel that great in the morning when you wake up, and dying, the prospect of dying in this issue is something you have to confront. It's not all, roses. So we really did take on a lot more serious issues, and photojournalism was there to make people understand it, to see it, to feel it in ways that words can't always accomplish.
In the exhibit, you couldn't put every edition.
Oh my goodness, it's been such a process.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, Jeff Witherow's been done most of the work on this, but I mean, I actually went through all the old archives online and tried to whittle some of it down because his time is very limited.
You're talking about the chief photographer.
Chief photographer, Jeff Witherow. So to try to take some of that, I went through some of the older issues and tried to pull out some things such as this and other images that, could be considered. And then he has had to go through them all and look for the negatives and look for the prints and try to, and not in some instances they're not there.
We forget where did they go?
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
What about black and white?
Sometimes things get borrowed.
Yeah, that's right. Never put back.
Right.
Black and white versus color. What is your opinion? Or did you have to say, well, I got to have a mix? Or
in those days, we didn't have a choice. The printing process was not. I mean, color was spot color. You'd have and in fact, the previous staff used to fill the bubble around Courier Journal. Sometimes it would be hot pink in the bubble, and the type would be purple or green.
Just to use color?
Just to use it because an advertiser had paid for it. I remember one time when I was at Wolf, we had an advertiser that paid for color, and the ad guy came over very cocky and said, "Well, I got you a present for this week. We got free color online." I'm like, "Yeah, who's the client?" He told me the client. I'm like, "Pepto Pink is not going on the front page." because that was the client's signature color. And like, thanks for the offer. No, we'll decline. But you couldn't do that. So you could have spot color, which was these kind of obnoxious colors. We started shooting color, I think, when Greg Francis was the photographer, but we were still printing them largely in black and white. And then it wasn't until much later that until we moved to the presses of the DNC, in around 2003, that we had color online throughout the paper. Sometimes we would have, previous to that, we would have a color cover photo, but not the whole paper. So around 2003, we started going to full color in the paper. And we also had, made the conversion to digital some years before that. And I don't remember what year that was either. It's been a while.
When did it become the Catholic Courier? When did the name
1889.
change?
It was the 100th anniversary.
Okay.
It was one of those things where the paper has had the names Courier, Catholic Courier, and Journal in various combinations since 1889. It was originally started as the Catholic Journal, and then it somehow became the Catholic Courier and Journal. And then the words got swirled around in circles a bunch of times. It was crazy. I don't know how we just kept rearranging the names. But anyway, so it was Courier Journal when I came on board, when Jeff Goulding came on board. And then at the 100th anniversary, the board decided to change it back to Catholic Courier because they felt that better reflected the identity.
So with the exhibit, what are you most excited about?
Just having the opportunity to show people the evolution of, we've got some old pictures from, the era of Bishop Sheen, Bishop Carney. We've got Bishop Hogan in there. We've got, lots of things from both of the Bishop, the Clark and the Matano administrations. But it's just, the range of photography, the talent, the sheer talent that's available in all of these photographers are brilliant. And what they each brought a different perspective, and just the range of the kinds of images. I'd love to people that I don't know, how much the general public is aware of what's in the Courier and how creative this work is. And how insightful it is. So that I just looking forward to that opportunity to have people become more aware.
Well, thank you, Karen, for joining us. And coming up, we will be joined by Jeff Goulding, who was the first photographer under the new staff at the Courier Journal. The Art Gallery Style exhibition will be on display at the Thomas Terry Art Gallery at St. John's Home in Rochester for the month of October 2024. The exhibit will be free and open to the public to view daily during visiting hours. For more information, including times the exhibit will be available for viewing, visit our website, catholiccourier.com/lensoffaith. Jeff Goulding was a photographer with the Catholic Courier, which was then known as the Courier Journal from 1985 to 1987.
After he left the Catholic Courier, Jeff remained in photojournalism, and he was a photographer at the Times-Herald Record, that's in Middletown, New York, and he has retired from being an adjunct professor of photojournalism at Marist College, which is in Poughkeepsie. But we're so glad he could join us today, and we want to talk about your time with the Catholic Courier because, a lot of people do remember it as the Catholic Journal. Tell us about your day-to-day responsibilities.
It was a great move. I'd worked with Karen at a previous newspaper, and when she got the editorship at the CJ or Courier Journal or whatever it's being called now, she brought me along with her, and it was a great experience. Not only did I shoot the pictures, I was also privileged enough and trusted enough to lay out the paper. So I'd take the pictures, and then deadline would come along, and Karen would be spitting out copy, and I'd be laying it out and working with the back shop, and then they'd lay it out according to my design. So that was lots of fun. It added a dimension to journalism and photography and the paper to showcase what needed to be showcased.
And at the time, it was a weekly paper, right? So you were turning a lot of photos around and laying out quite a bit of pages to get this paper out, right?
Yeah, I forgot when deadline day was. I think it was Tuesday into Wednesday. And then we had to get off the floor by Wednesday because it was delivered the next day, I think. I forgot the deadlines. But yeah, it was we'd come back and had soup film. It was before the digital age. So soup film, print it out, take it over to the shop, they'd half tone it, lay it out, and it'd go from there.
Obviously, people who have been in a dark room or have done traditional photography know what you're talking about. But you actually had a dark room. It wasn't just like a quick picture on your phone and boom, it's in the cloud, right? It was quite a process.
It was. And so we had a great dark room at the Courier. I helped design that as well. And it was great. I'm sure there isn't even a dark room there anymore, or maybe a workspace.
No, no
Even
dark room
today-
anymore.
Yeah. But even today, when you see photographers at a sporting event, they usually have a big vest on. They have all kinds of equipment, lenses, and multiple cameras. That was probably your day to day. Can you describe the equipment that you were using?
Sure. I had two Nikons. I forgot what model numbers, maybe FM2 and an F whatever. I had two Nikon bodies with winders. I had three lenses, a wide, a telephoto, and a super telephoto, and carried around in a vest. I had a shoulder bag, but as equipment got smaller and a little bit lighter, I was able to carry it on my person in the vest. So in that vest, you had to have everything that you probably need for a photo: flash, extra batteries, extra cords, all that stuff.
Well, and when you came to the Courier, the emphasis was before it was mostly there was a change. There was starting to be more of an emphasis on photos. Did you realize that as you came aboard that there was just more emphasis put on photos instead of just written copy?
It's always been a debate between you word people and visuals. And Karen was great. The paper before we got there was not very, did not have a whole lot of photos in them. There was a lot of copy, a bunch of little tiny ads. The photos that were there were either gotten from Catholic Press or the photo service there. And after Catholic Press got it, they would step on it or they'd copy it, and the quality would just diminish. So Karen came in and said, no, this is going to be a local diocese paper, and we need to have local art. It helps get people into the paper. They didn't like the paper anyway to begin with, because it was mandated through the diocese that they had to get the paper, along with like Catholic New York. Catholic New York was the same way. That was kind of being forced down their throats to help support Catholic New York, and maybe by chance help support the Courier Journal. I think those feelings faded by the time I left there. We're actually being recognized as a paper for the diocese and welcomed with open arms. I don't know, but the access was much better, especially if you have the bishop on your side.
Right. And the pictures do help, right? I mean, people like to gravitate to those pictures. And let's talk about the exhibit, because some of your sports photos are going to be highlighted there. And particularly, you shot a lot of sporting events. Do you want to describe that and your assignments?
Sure. Sporting was not covered at all by the former Courier Journal, maybe some box scores or something like that. But the Catholic schools within the Rochester and within the diocese itself, it's a huge diocese. They were really good at sports. Most teams went to the finals, either in AA or AAA. I don't know if it was quite big enough for AAA, but or Class B. And they worked really, really hard, these kids. And it was never documented in the former Courier. And this is what drew people in, I'm sure. I hope, because a lot of people are interested in sports, and especially for kids in the paper. So that helped things a lot. Plus, the sporting events were good. They're very talented kids.
I'm looking at one of your sports photos that is going to be in the exhibit. It's this DeSales High School sectional loss from 1986. Do you remember anything about this photo? It really captures people being like the team losing and defeat, and then in the corner you can see the other team celebrating. So do you remember anything about this photo that you took?
I don't, particularly. It's a
I know
while
it's a
ago,
while ago.
but more than likely it was probably a very close game. Um, and DeSalle's really, I'm sure, came within a point or two, and they were going back and forth between the scores. And then it was just a classic jubilation, agony of defeat kind of photo. I was able to get with a little bit wider angle lens of these guys just losing it on the floor, and then the celebration in the back. It was a really sad moment for DeSalle's, but I think in the one picture, it tells the story.
You captured both sides for sure in just that one angle. You had the perfect angle, and sometimes that's just by luck. You're in the right place at the right time. Do you think it was better to have the losers in the forefront and the winners in the back?
Yeah, because DeSalle's was a school that we're covering. I don't know, Harley Allendale, Columbia, um, was not our focus. DeSalle's was, because they were in our. I'm sure Harley Allendale was also, but our focus was on DeSalle's. So I think it's important to show who we're writing about in the photo versus. I mean, it could be a great jubilation shot, but if we're not writing about them, it doesn't do much good.
With sports, it can be so repetitive. I mean, if you're going to a basketball game, you're going to another basketball game. It's the same sort of thing happening. So how do you try to go into those assignments and hope that you get like a really good shot? Because you don't even know what's going to happen, but it's the same thing. A basketball game, you got two teams. So how do you make a similar assignment different every time?
You just got to keep your eyes open. Sports sometimes I think is the only last bastion of true journalism, because so many the participants are not looking at the camera necessarily. They're not even aware that you're there. They're playing the game, and you can get really candid action shots of them doing whatever sport they're in. So each game presents a different type of scenario. Could be a basketball. So the center shot is a hairy armpit shot. Okay, you got that. Got your bases covered. So then you start looking around for other types of pictures, either a type of layout, somebody who likes to slam dunk. It's not always, the action is not always on the court. It's in the audience. The people watching the game is. I was covering a West Point game, and there's a guy screaming, and that was the picture. The action was fine, but the audience looking at their kids or looking at the game itself can be just as equally important or interesting picture.
Yeah, let's look at the other. There's another picture between McQuaid versus East, another basketball game from 1987. But you were above the basket, looking down, and you captured the ball going in. I mean, it's again, timing is everything, but that angle certainly. How did you get that?
Well, traditionally, what you do is you go up in the rafters and you set up a remote. But back in '87. That wasn't really practical, especially on the budget that we had. So I think this was at either Mount St. Mary's, or there's another, maybe even New Paltz, where the sectionals were being held at. I think it's sectionals, that you can get behind the basket and shoot down on it. And I just waited for the ball to come in and took my time, and they eventually went up for a layup and shot. And of course, they're too busy. They're focused on the ball, and they didn't even know I was there.
Yeah, and then one of your other photos here, it looks like you might be in a locker room. This is the Aquinas mission bouts back in '87. I believe Aquinas still does their mission bouts still today. But yeah, how did you get access to this? This looks like, again, you were in a locker room.
Locker rooms aren't too hard to get into. You talk to the coaches, and you ask if you can get in. You treat people with respect. If you treat them with respect, they treat you with respect. And this was during a fight, and a guy was being comforted by either his partner or another friend or another guy involved in that. And you just go in and be quiet as possible and just take pictures as they happen in front of you. You don't become the news. You document the news. You document the event that happens in front of your lens, and you just be there at the right time.
I know, Jeff, you were based here locally in the Rochester area, but you were sent out into the diocese, and you said it's, lots of counties and you have to cover them. You were sent to Elmira. I know that was a really important trip for you in the Horseheads, Elmira area. Can you talk about that, Mont Savior Monastery, and what you did there?
That was a great trip and a great assignment. Rich Kiley really did a bang up job writing the story. We went down, talked to Father Martin. I doubt that he's still with us, but he was such a gentleman, and people would come from all over. I don't know if he had to even be part of the diocese to go there, but they would open their arms and their cottages and their food and everything to you, and you'd come and go on a retreat, so to speak, either reconnect with your spiritual advisor or spiritualness or whatever. And he'd spend hours just walking and talking with various people visiting that monastery. They also happened to raise sheep, and sheep was a great thing. Father Martin and brother, can't remember his name, but he would be out tending sheep, and that was just a perfect opportunity to be able to photograph these guys in the natural environment. We were up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to Vespers, and we went to services every, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours since then, and closed the night with, I forget the name of the service, but we were there with them, and it starts off really cool, very quiet, very somber, candlelit only in this very, very small chapel. And then as the day progressed, they moved the services to other areas of the monastery. And it was remarkable. It was just a really neat experience. They were also on a macrobiotic diet, so it was a very interesting diet. And it was really good to experience that as well as the whole thing.
Now, did you go down multiple times for this?
No.
Or was it one?
It was a 1 week journey. I think it was 7 days. Went down one day and came back, and then processed film. And I think there's a week or so between publications. So there was a little bit of time to sit and edit and pick the pictures of what was needed. And it took Rich a while to write it as well. So we all worked together, and it worked out really nicely.
Can I ask you, this is your job, but when your job exposes you to these spiritual aspects, do you find yourself kind of sucking it all in as well? Do you become changed yourself as you're working through this assignment?
I don't know if I've become changed. I've become much more aware of, I don't know about aware of other lifestyles. It's hard to participate in a story and not be changed by it, especially the focus and the grasping at words here, the lack of better word, the spirituality of the place. You are affected. How much you carry with you after the assignment is done? Yeah, it's a good question. I think it affected me profoundly. I don't know. The World Trade Center collapse affected me profoundly in covering that. That's no compare. That's apples and oranges. But yeah, I think any assignment you go into affects you, and it makes you a better whole person, I think, once you experience all this stuff.
Yeah, and one of the assignments you had a lot of assignments involving protests, ones that you remember, and I'm sure those might have had an effect on you too. One that I know you told us you remember was the 40th anniversary of Hiroshima, and you went down to Seneca Falls for a protest. Can you talk about that?
A lot of walking, lots and lots of walking. We started off, it was a 20-mile march, and it started somewhere, and we schlepped down and walked down. There were signs and everything else going on, and eventually I was carrying all my gear. I was getting slower and slower and slower, and I was bound and determined I'm going to finish this walk. And the guy comes in, "Hey, you're going to miss all the ceremonies down here with the survivors and everything else. Let me give you a lift back." I grumbled, and I went back, and sure enough, they got me back in time to shoot the ceremonies back at the finish line, or back at where this was being staged. And I almost finished it, but it was a fun experience.
Do you ever feel that, again, compelled once you get into an experience, and like you talked about survivors? So I don't know what your impression leading into that assignment, but then you get to a protest and you experience so many different perhaps emotions along with people that are you looking for a specific shot or a specific angle to the story, and your pictures need to express that? Is there any of that kind of discussion going on with your editors?
No. What's really great was working at the paper is that the editors trusted in me to come back with a usable picture. As a journalist, you have to remain neutral. There are some protests that I've covered that I hated what was going on in front of me. And it's really, really hard to keep neutral in those situations, but you really have to. There's so much disinformation out there. And if you can be honest and truthful with your camera and show what's happening, then you let the people the readers determine it was good or bad. But you're right. It's really hard not to get involved, but you have to. You just have to stay neutral.
Well, Jeff, is there anything else you would want to share about your time at the Courier Journal? That's what it was when you were there, that you would like to share with our listeners?
Karen was a slave driver. She kept me going for 24/7. I couldn't get any sleep. She was great. The whole diocese thing was really good. We had an uphill battle going from getting our own space to layout to getting over a barrel of a contract that was not very good until we got out to our own space. All was good. It was a really great experience, and especially with the Courier Journal, the social issues that were raised, and for that to tell pictures to tell a story of social issues that the paper covered, I think served a great thing, because a lot of people they don't care, or they don't know what was going on. But if you get out for the protests or other protests, things like that, it'll bring awareness to at least what's going on in the diocese, or tangentially the world.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for joining us and sharing about your time at the Courier Journal. You can see Jeff's photos along with other Courier photographers' photos in an exhibit this October. For more information, visit our website, catholiccourier.com/lensoffaith.